I remember the day like it was any other. In fact, our mission that week felt so routine I was ready to fall asleep on watch. I had been on the USS Annapolis, a Los Angeles-class attack submarine, for weeks, smoothing out every last twitch of my watch-standing routine. I was Chief Petty Officer Mark Doyle, a sonar technician, perched in the bowels of the control room with my eyes glued to the emerald green radar and sonar screens. All around me, the gentle hum of the reactor and the whoosh of coolant pumps was a constant lullaby. The metal bulkheads were cool and humming, the sweet smell of machine oil and salt in the air. It felt safe, predictable, until it didn't. We were on a deep ocean patrol far off the coast of Greenland. The Neptune tides had drawn us well away from any busy sea lanes. We focused on routine sonar drills, system checks, and mapping the seafloor beneath the ice edge. Officially, it was a training patrol, charting old cable routes and testing new acoustic sensors. Among the crew, however, the whispers told of something more. Rumors of secret cables, seismic detectors, anomalies the brass wouldn't explain. But order was order, and in the subservice, we obey. We went through motions, swapping sonar tapes, adjusting passive arrays, chuckling at a low-slung movie in the mess at day's end. For now, that sufficed. At 2100 hours, the night watch settled in. The control room was dimly lit, bathed in the glow of sonar screens and red safe lights on the bulkhead. I scanned the active sonar scope out of habit. A distant Arctic coast glowed on the screen, with slight pings of drifting ice floes, but nothing menacing. A pair of pings registered a nearby merchant ship on the surface. Legitimate, out-of-area traffic, in fact. No threat there. I sipped my coffee, now cold from a chipped thermos, and checked my chronometer. Every 10 minutes, I'd mark our position in the gyro navigation system, cross-checking with our last surface GPS fix before going under. As I tapped off yet another innocuous degree of latitude, I felt the sub glide forward on autopilot. Above us, the sea might be alive with wind and waves, but down here, the world was breathtakingly quiet. Everything felt routine. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, my relief, manned the sonar station across the room. She offered me a tired smile and gave a thumbs up. "See you later," as I prepared to rotate out. On the bridge above, Captain Reynolds and the XO quietly ran through tomorrow's schedule on a chart table. I peeked at the navigation chart pinned there. Vast blue emptiness stretched before us, calm waters and empty radar pings. Beneath, I imagined drifting schools of fish and drifting thermals, but on the screen, it was all lines and beeps. With every system humming normally, I let my mind wander. Yet something crawled at the back of my mind. Maybe it was just tiredness. The ventilation fan sang too evenly. The hull creaked in the cold without rhyme. Even the watch clocks seemed to tick louder. It was too quiet. I shook off the chill that crept over me. At 000 hours, I signed off with Lieutenant Kim and made my way through the narrow passageway toward the berthing deck. The sub smelled of greasy pumps and the lingering tang of our dinner's coffee. I nodded off even before reaching my rack. I set the alarm on my wristwatch for 2:30 hours and collapsed into the thin mattress. The submarine's gentle hum lulled me away. Tomorrow promised more of the same, or so I thought. A blaring alarm jolted me awake. My heart shot into my throat. "Reactor offline! Reactor offline!" The klaxon bellowed through the steel corridors. Red emergency lights flooded the compartment. Everything happened in a heartbeat. I bolted upright, adrenaline slamming through my veins. The analog clock face above me glowed, 2:30. This was no drill. I sprinted back toward the control room, boots pounding the metal deck. Lieutenant Kim was already there, hunkered at her station with panic on her face. The control room had erupted into chaos. On every console, warning lights blinked and sirens wailed. Our once calm sonar screens were dark or flashing errors. The bulkheads rattled with the sudden silence. The reactor's hum was gone. The fans had slowed to a near stop. The Annapolis was suddenly an unmoving elephant underwater, and I realized with a shock we had lost all power.
"Report!" Commander Donovan, officer of the watch, barked above the din, thumping his fist on the table. Chief Engineer Liu was already at the auxiliary control panel. Her hands flew over switches in the red light. "Sir, reactor scram, main generator offline, and the diesels, they haven't come up." My pulse pounded. The whole heart of the submarine had stopped. The hull itself felt heavier, like the pressure of the deep ocean itself was pressing in. Around me, men at stations were yelling and scrambling. Ballast control, hydraulics, life support, everything was on emergency.
"Backup power," Donovan snapped. Liu's hands shook as she checked gauges. "Emergency batteries only. We've got lighting and minimal controls, but no main electrical." The huge diesel generators meant to ride out a nuclear fault had inexplicably failed too. We were running solely on the dim afterglow of battery power, with only red emergency lights glowing. The fans died almost completely. The only sound left was the muffled slap of water on the hull and our own ragged breathing. I buckled myself into the sonar chair for stability. The image of swirling darkness outside pressed at the memory of a summer afternoon. But now Annapolis was fixed in black water. The only light was from glowing dials and the emergency lights on consoles. I flicked on the emergency sonar. A ping went out. Ooh! On the screen, a thin green line appeared, the vague outline of the seabed below. In the dim display, nothing else moved. The near silence was worse than any alarm. In that void, I could almost hear my heartbeat. "Sir," I said quietly into the squad leader mic, "I've got hull creaks and water current outside, but no contacts on passive." I left the periscope down. There was no point stirring the water from here. Something floated off our stern. I see a tiny blip moving, but no Doppler. The faint dot on the scanner was matching our slow drift, about 2 knots. Donovan leaned over my console. The graphic was barely visible. "We shouldn't be moving under power," he said. "Could be a debris or a glitch. Passive is dead quiet. Keep me posted." No one wanted to call active sonar. That might provoke an unknown visitor. We realized we needed eyes outside, but sending out a man was impossible. "Nightingale," Donovan said. Every head snapped up. The Annapolis still had 1 torpedo tube free, and we'd stocked a small ROV in the rack for emergencies. It was nicknamed Nightingale, a sleek black torpedo-like drone with cameras and a tether. If something lurked out there, Nightingale would see it. The launching was swift and tense. In red light, sonar techs prepared the tube, while the rest of us watched the monitors with bated breath. Sirens muted to a low hum. A whoosh of air, Nightingale was ejected from the hull and began its descent on tether. On our screens, its low-light camera snapped on, casting a pale blue cone into the black. Tiny sea bugs and silt drifted by in the beam as it descended. We waited, silent. The sonar linked to Nightingale pinged once, twice, and then on. The dots on its sonar traced the ocean floor. And then something moved into view. A vast form materialized like smoke in front of the camera. My stomach churned as the shape filled the screen. It was huge, at least as long as our entire sub. It drifted calmly along the ocean floor. I stared, barely breathing. The thing had a long body and broad flippers, and its skin glistened with pale bioluminescent stripes. On one side, Nightingale's lights glinted off an enormous eye, cold and unblinking. The eye was human-like, maybe the size of a truck tire. Below it was a disturbingly human face structure, a flat, wide cranium, slitted irises. On its chin were tentacle-like tendrils that floated slowly in the current. "What the hell is that?" Lieutenant Kim whispered behind me. The crew around me gasped softly. I watched transfixed as the creature turned slightly and looked directly into the drone's camera. For a moment, I swear we were staring each other down through the depths. Nightingale pinged again. The creature twitched. Almost lazily, it started to move toward Nightingale. The sonar scope bleeped repeatedly, a signal of something large sliding our way. Then something smashed into the ROV with brutal force. A crack of static erupted on the speakers. Nightingale spun wildly on screen. The only image was a distorted burst of water, then darkness. "Camera off! Sonar static!" someone yelled.
The submarine shook as if hit by a giant fist. I slumped forward, clutching the console. A deafening alarm bell shattered the tense hush. Warning, hull breach, flashed momentarily. Then nothing. Silence. The hull of Annapolis groaned once, as if shaken awake. And in that instant, the emergency lights blinked off. Panic clutched me. I tasted metal on my tongue as oxygen cut out for a second. Then, just like that, everything came back. The lights surged to full, computers hummed, and alarms died. The reactor had self-healed, and the diesels roared on. We were back to normal. The control room was steeped in stunned quiet. Donovan was on his feet, eyes wide. Chief Liu scanned the readouts quickly. "No breaches, no flooding, all systems nominal," she stammered. "Sensors say Nightingale is offline, likely impacted by whatever that was, but we're intact, sir." Donovan turned to me, voice tight. "So we really did see something under there?" I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. "Yes, sir. We had an unknown contact as big as the sub. It rammed the drone." He nodded slowly. "Any sign of it now?" I checked the sonar. The echo grid was blank beyond the floor line. The creature, whatever it was, had vanished. The team recovered Nightingale on the tether cable. Its lights were out and thrusters sputtering. The imagery was lost forever. We were lucky it hadn't come for us. But one thing was clear. Something alive had been down there, and it had heard us. We let out breath we didn't know we were holding. My hands trembled on the console. Eyes met around the room, faces pale but resolute. The creature might be gone, but we were still in command of Annapolis. For now, the dark had released its prey.
The instant power returned. Normal operations began humming back to life. The reactor's hum filled the compartment. Pumps whirred, lights blinked steady green. Aftershocks of adrenaline lingered in my limbs. One by one, the officers checked systems. None showed damage. Everything indicated Annapolis had simply suffered a freak blackout. Commander Donovan turned back to me. "Status, Doyle. Nav logs?" My throat still dry. I swallowed. "Sir, that's the thing." I hesitated and pointed to the navigation chart recorder on the bulkhead. The paper tape was still unraveling. We had expected it to stop when power died. Instead, the pen was still tracing our course. On the scroll of nav plot, a line peeled steadily from south to north. It had never stopped. The curve continued seamlessly through the blackout period. The sub's track kept moving 2 knots north for 6 hours straight. I traced it with my finger, stunned. Donovan snatched the tape. His eyes flicked over the plotted points. "This can't be right," he muttered. "We were dead in the water." "All the instruments agree," Liu whispered, lips trembling. "The inertial nav data shows continuous motion, too. 8 nautical miles north since we lost power." We all stared. He ran a hand over his face. "So our boat moved on its own?" He glanced at Lieutenant Kim and the helmsman. "Any explanations?" They shook their heads, equally pale. The inertial guidance should have frozen without gyros. It shouldn't have recorded any movement, but the proof was before us on that paper. We had drifted, apparently under some mysterious influence, even though nothing was driving us. I looked around at the crew. A paranoid dread settled in. We had our answer now. Something out there had moved Annapolis for us. But what? An undersea current? A glitch? Or a conscious push? None of it made sense. Commander Donovan cleared his throat, voice steady. "Plot that on a SEC order report. We'll call it an instrumentation glitch for now." His tone brooked no argument. But after the meeting broke up, in hushed corridors and cramped bunks, men whispered, could an ocean current have done it? They pointed out that our course had been straight and steady, no lateral push that a current would normally cause. Some swore they heard phantom thumps along the hull afterwards, as if the deep was mocking us. I sat alone at my station replaying the event. The logbook would soon note an unplanned power loss with no mention of what lurked out there. We all had silent agreements to never speak of it, but in my chest burned a question. Had Annapolis truly sailed herself?
I resumed my watch carefully. Every ping of sonar, every click of instruments grated my nerves anew. The sub held a ghostly calm. It was now hours later, and I suddenly realized my watch's timepiece was still on battery power too. It had kept ticking. I checked it and blinked. According to it, only 5 minutes had passed, but the record said 6 hours. 6 hours gone as if stolen by the deep. We had no further choice but to continue. By dawn, we were to surface and head home. The rest of the patrol took on an eerie routine. We let our distress fade behind paperwork and charts, but all of us knew Annapolis had left her fate to something enormous down there. The return voyage was an uneasy calm. At first light, we surfaced under diesel power to break the ice edge near Greenland. Up on the sail, pale sunlight haloed the horizon. We radioed our superiors a dry report. Transient power failure, minor course drift, all systems nominal. The message was dully routine, the response uneventful. Nobody outside knew about the true cause of our stray track. On the map, Annapolis simply kept heading north, then circled home. Back in the control room, though, tension crackled under the surface. The crew was subdued. Conversations at mess were like whispers in a church. Some tried humor. Did the sub do a nil dance without the engine? Others exchanged uneasy glances over charts, but no one dared bring up the night's events outright. I kept busy, but my dreams were haunted. I'd wake to the pitch-black silence on watch, convinced the lights would die again. More than once I startled awake imagining tiny sonar echoes floating toward me in the dark. Sometimes I thought I'd hear a tapping at the hull, but it was just ice shifting or a distant whale slapping water. Late one afternoon, an uncommon radio crackled in briefly, half a tune, half static, then gone. "Nothing to report," the communications officer said dismissively. Yet several of us heard it and shared uneasy looks. No one wanted to admit we might have strayed into waters with old wrecks or worse. The ice waters outside Annapolis were dotted with legends of ghosts and monsters. I felt silly to be scared, yet I was bone-deep frightened. At night, in my bunk, I found myself reviewing our logs in my head. The mechanical nav tape was hidden in a folder under my rack. In private, I unrolled it on the desk. The line was a cold comfort, unbroken ink across that 6-hour span. I traced it slowly, memorizing every twist and turn. It didn't lie. Our sub moved on its own. The crew drifted through the rest of the mission like sleepwalkers. I think deep down we all realized we had nearly ridden the knife edge of something unknowable, and we'd backed off. On the last evening before our return, the command deck held a quiet briefing. Captain Reynolds spoke in clipped tones about progress, ice conditions, nothing about the anomaly. I noticed he fingered the nav chart with a slight tremble. Did I imagine it? His jaw was tight, eyes on the sea blue map.
Finally, home port came into view. The harbor's calm waters below echoed the uneasy calm aboard. By the time we docked, the official story was locked in. We debriefed in spotless command offices. The captain drank black coffee and stared into space. No one would admit they believed in strange sea monsters, but in secret logs and private notes, we all agreed something was out there in the dark. It's been years since that patrol ended. Life on land moves too fast. I hold on to these memories like driftwood. In my off-duty job as a civilian sonar analyst, I sometimes overhear scientists discussing odd seismic blips near Greenland, earthquakes that have no tectonic origin. When they mention patterns repeating every few months, my heart still skips. I see their puzzled faces and wish I could cross-examine them. Did you ever consider it's something alive down there? Nightmares visited me for weeks after the trip.
In one, I was the sub's sole sailor in the dark control room, listening to my own heartbeat echo back at me as if the ocean had stolen everything else. In another, our ship glided on its own to a bottomless trench, and from the murk came a groan like the world ending. I'd wake with a scream that soaked my pillow. Still, I learned to live with the odd paranoia. Often I find myself listening to the slightest sounds, the drip of the faucet, wind rattling the window, my cat's tail brushing the floor. Sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I can pick out a quiet pattern in these noises, a gentle tick, click, tick, like it's faintly communicating. I have proof we didn't stop moving. The navigation tape still sits rolled up in an archive box at home, labeled Drift Study. It's faded and yellowed, but every dark mark is indelible truth, a straight streak of ink through those 6 ghost hours. I don't show it to people. They'd think me mad, but in quiet moments, I unfurl it and watch that line, retracing it with a chill. I joined the Navy not to chase fairy tales. I believed in physics, machinery, all of it black and white. Yet on that frozen night, I learned how very wrong that confidence was. Our sub had become a ghost ship for one midnight, and whatever held the helm kept the sea perfectly silent, as if even the depths themselves were listening. If this reaches anyone out there, remember, the ocean is vast and patient. It holds things ancient beyond our understanding, and sometimes, if you listen carefully, you might just hear it whisper back.